Good afternoon. I've been a pediatrician for more than 2 decades, and every day I spend time with parents, and I spend a lot of time with teachers at parenting workshops in schools. And most parents and teachers tell me that it's just so hard to communicate with children these days. They're just so busy, you see. If it's not WhatsApp, it's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. The list is endless, and we don't even know what will become a rage in the coming week, do we? Also, this generation is very different. They like to argue, they like to question, they like to cross-question, they like to debate. And many parents and teachers struggle with how to communicate with the argumentative child. And because communication is breaking down, parents and teachers feel and worry they might be failing in their duty to prepare children to face the world. How can we master this art of communication? I developed a method developed by studying children over 20 years, seeing how children interact with their parents. And I then used this method on our son Devang. After having tried it, I wrote a book. And the book is called Is Your Child Ready to Face the World? And it's really my attempt at sharing this experiment. So what was the method? It's a relatively simple method. The idea was to get 15 minutes of undivided attention from Devang. It couldn't be a fixed day every week or every other week, because then it would become a formal activity, and children don't like that. It was an activity that he was driving. It couldn't be a sermon. It had to be a two-way communication. So it would be about me nudging Devang to talk about something that happened at school, something that happened at play. And I would then think of an example that would fit in with the mood. I would dip into my limited stock of stories and then try and weave a story around a value that I believed was was important to imbibe, yet difficult for Devang to understand. We would sometimes go onto the net and search the web together, but of course Devang would be driving the discussion. We would sometimes go on for half an hour, even longer, but when Devang said he wanted to stop, we'd stop. I was very frugal with the use of my experience, because the moment you tell a child, in my experience, the child says, yeah, and then the child just switches off. I was reminded of what Charles Wadsworth had once said. By the time a man realizes that maybe his father was right, he usually has a son who thinks he's wrong. We sometimes followed up the discussion by going and reading a magazine, reading a book, watching a film, maybe visiting a museum. Let me give you a couple of examples. In September and October, Apple comes out with its new iPhone. Now, if you have a son who wants an iPhone, these can be very demanding months. I remember 2010, the new iPhone had come out and Devang started making a passionate case for buying an iPhone. It's just so beautiful. The technology is awesome. The touch screen is just so smooth. You know, with the touch of a button, I will have access to so much information. I'll become a super bright kid. And he went on and on and on. Taking advantage of the excitement palpable in Devang, I thought this is a good time to talk about the highs and lows of Steve Jobs' life. Surprisingly, he was enthusiastic. Imagine dropping out of college after 6 months, founding a company at the age of 21, creating a $2 billion company, being thrown out from the company that you founded, creating a new company next, buying another one called Pixar, 10 years later, being invited to come back and become the CEO of the company that actually fired you, and creating the most valuable company in the world. An amazing story of rising, falling, and rising. An amazing story of determination. So whenever our children come to us with disappointment, having tasted failure, perhaps we should talk about Steve Jobs and the way Apple's going. I'm sure there will be an Apple gadget handy for us to drive home the point. These days, kids decide what's going to come into the house. From refrigerators, to televisions, to music systems, to DVDs, to computers, and of course, cars. So we wanted to buy a car. And of course, our son thought that he was in the driver's seat and he was the one who was making the decision about deciding which car to buy. So he did his research and we zeroed in on a Honda. And there an opportunity presented itself to talk about Suichiro Honda. Suichiro Honda, the founder of Honda, grew up in a village. One day, when he was very young, a car came to his village. He ran behind the car. He stuck his hand in the puddle of oil that the car had left behind. And that day, a boy found his calling. He wanted to make automobiles. He said several years later, I could never get the smell of oil out of my mind. Suichiro Honda did not have a university diploma, yet he had 470 inventions, 150 patents, 2 honorary doctorates. Honda became the first Japanese car to manufacture in the United States. It became the second largest manufacturer of cars in the world. He was honored with the Blue Ribbon, which is Japan's highest honor. Suichiro Honda achieved what he did because he had found his calling. We too must help our children find their calling. What were the values that I was talking about? What were the values that I wanted to instill? Values that we know define greatness, values that we have known for millennia, values that we know are so important yet so hard to instill in our children. Values such as honesty, integrity, humility, giving, compassion. And let me share with you a few of these values. We all want to do so much. We try, and then we meet an obstacle, and we give up. Whenever Devang talked about giving up, I would take him to a hospital. I'm a pediatrician, so it was easy, but others can do that as well. So I would take him to interact with children and their parents admitted in hospital and see children with cannulas and catheters and see what it means to smile when you have pain, when you're undergoing painful treatment, so that he would realize what real challenges are all about, what it means not to give up, because there are some amazing families that just never give up. Jodie Miller was a toddler when she developed convulsions. It's very terrifying for a parent to see a child have a convulsion. Jodie was started on treatment, but the convulsions went on increasing. There came a time when Jodie, despite all kinds of treatment, was having more than 100 convulsions a day. She was taken to a specialist, and the specialist made a diagnosis of a condition known as Rasmussen's encephalitis. This is a very rare condition seen in 1 in 500,000 to 1 million children. Normal healthy children who suddenly develop convulsions, and the convulsions start from one half of the brain. The brain has 2 halves. And then the convulsions go on increasing, life gets compromised, and the child really has a very, very poor quality of life. Jodie's parents were told that the convulsions would go away if she underwent surgery. And the surgery was radical, to put it mildly radical, because it meant removing half her brain. It's called a radical hemispherectomy. Imagine being told as a parent that the treatment is not removing 10%, 5%, 20%, 30%, 40%, but half your child's brain. And we all know that small parts of the brain, a few centimeters or even less, control very important functions like language, communication, walking. So what would happen to Jodie if half her brain was removed? But the Miller family was not going to give up, because this was their only hope. So Jodie underwent the surgery. Half her brain was removed. That half became filled with fluid. And because the young brain has more neuroplasticity, the neurons from the other hemisphere started taking over the functions of the hemisphere that was removed. She went through prolonged rehabilitation. She topped class 2. She finished middle school. She went to high school. Jodie went to university. Jodie wants to become a teacher. Imagine leading a full life with half her brain. The Miller family was never going to give up. We all want to change so much. We want to change boundaries. We want to change the environment. We want to change the way students are taught in school. We want to change the world, don't we? And in our quest for change, we change jobs, professions, cities, countries, even spouses. But always the onus is on someone else. We forget that we have control only over ourselves. I wanted Devang to understand Mahatma Gandhi's message, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." It was 2nd October. Mahatma Gandhi's memorial. We went to the memorial on 2nd of October. We talked about the values. We talked about how Mahatma Gandhi changed the world. We followed that up with numerous discussions. We read his autobiography together. We watched this amazing movie called Gandhi together. I wanted Devang to understand this concept of be the change. A lady once took her son to Mahatma Gandhi. She was very worried about his health because he ate too much jaggery, too much sweet. So she wanted Mahatma Gandhi to counsel her son. So Mahatma Gandhi paused for a moment and said, "Why don't you bring the young man back after a few days?" So a few days later, dutifully, he took her son back to Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi said to the young man, "You should stop eating jaggery. It's bad for your health." So the lady was very surprised, and she said, "If you had to say this, why didn't you say this when we first came?" And Mahatma Gandhi replied, "I needed a few days to give up eating jaggery to counsel your son with conviction." Suhasini Mistry was one of 14 siblings. 7 of her siblings had died in childhood. At the age of 12, she was married. She had 4 children. At 23, her husband died for want of medical attention, and that day, Suhasini Mistry took a pledge. She decided that what had happened to her should not happen to others, and she shall make a hospital. She was not educated. She had 4 children to raise, 2 boys, 2 girls. 2 of the children went to an orphanage. She did household work. Her daughters got married, her eldest son started working. She kept thinking about that pledge of making a hospital. Over 20 years, she had saved 10,000 rupees, that's $150. With that, she bought a small plot of land in her husband's village. Her youngest son, Ajoy, was in an orphanage, and he was very good at studying, so she encouraged him to study harder. He got through the entrance exam, got admission into the Calcutta Medical College through a scholarship. He graduated, he became a doctor. Suhasini Mistry kept thinking about that hospital. And 22 years after her husband had died, she built the Humanity Hospital in a thatched shed. She and her son approached doctors from around to come and do voluntary work. They went and collected surplus medicines, and on the first day, 252 patients were seen at the Humanity Hospital. This is what the Humanity Hospital looks like today. It has 2 operation theaters, 30 beds, 15,000 square feet. It refuses treatment to no one. So Suhasini Mistry became the change she wished to see in the world. We all have so much, don't we? Each one of us. But we don't realize the value of what we have till we lose it. Good health till we become unhealthy. The value of a friend till we part company. And our children are like that. They don't realize the value of a home, a school, parents, school trips, a birthday to look forward to. They don't realize that there are millions and millions of children in this world who crave for all that. And it's really not their fault. Because how often have our children seen us appreciate the power of gratitude? Devang is a big Roger Federer fan, and we were watching a tennis tournament and the finals, and Federer had won again, and Devang rattled off all the statistics, #1 for so many weeks, so many Grand Slams, and so on, and we started talking about his qualities, and I mentioned gratitude, and Devang said, "Gratitude?" I mentioned to Devang that once at the Australian Open, Roger Federer had said that with the number of injuries he sees in tennis today, he's so fortunate to be standing. Federer had not had many injuries, and he was grateful for that. He appreciated the power of gratitude. And as tennis was the theme that day, we shifted focus to Arthur Ashe. Arthur Ashe had won the US Open in '68, the Wimbledon in '75. He'd established the ATP. He had a huge fan following across the globe. At the age of 36, he had a heart attack. He then had a bypass surgery. 4 years later, he had another bypass surgery and received a blood transfusion. In 1992, he announced to the world that he had AIDS, which he had got from the blood transfusion that he had received, because at that time, blood was not screened for HIV. His fans were devastated, and one of his fans wrote to him and said, "Why did God have to select you for such a bad disease?" Arthur Ashe replied, "The world over, 50 million children start playing tennis. 5 million learn playing tennis. 500,000 learn professional tennis. 50,000 come to the circuit. 5,000 the Grand Slam. 50 reach the Wimbledon, 4 the semi-finals, 2 the finals. When I was holding the cup, did I ask God, why me? And so today in pain, how can I ask God, why me? What a powerful example of gratitude. Forgiveness is a virtue that's very hard to teach. Each one of us has been hurt. And the pain and the suffering is so vivid, it's so hard to forget, leave alone, forgive. And I was struggling, and I struggled for years on how to talk to Devang about forgiveness. We were watching the FIFA World Cup closing ceremony in South Africa on television. We were seeing Shakira perform, and suddenly the camera focused on Nelson Mandela. And there was that opportunity that one had been waiting for. Who can be a better example of embracing forgiveness? In 1956, Mandela was tried for treason and was sent to the Robben Island prison. He was a category D prisoner. His cell was 7 feet by 9 feet. It had no bed. He could walk the length of his cell in 3 paces. He could receive or write 1 letter in 6 months. He could receive 1 visitor in 6 months. So he was virtually cut off from the world. He was given the task of breaking limestone, and that damaged his eyes. When his son died, he was not allowed to attend the funeral. After 27 years in prison, Mandela was released at the age of 72. People asked him, "Don't you harbor any hatred? Aren't you angry against your oppressors?" And he replied, "Hating clouds the mind. Leaders cannot afford to hate." He led the African National Congress to victory, became the first black president of South Africa. And guess what he did? He spent time trying to bring the black and the white community together using the power of forgiveness. For his inauguration, he invited Paul Gregory. Paul Gregory was a prison warden at Robben Island. He invited Percy Yutar for a meal. Percy Yutar was the prosecutor who had asked Nelson Mandela at the time of his case for the death penalty. So people asked Mandela, "Why would you invite someone who had asked for the death penalty for you for a meal?" And Mandela said, "Percy Yutar was only doing his job." Mark Twain had said, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that crushed it." A few months ago, a friend sent me a WhatsApp message. It was about a little girl in Baghdad. It was getting late at night. She wanted to go to bed. She wanted to sleep in her mother's lap. So she took off her shoes, took a piece of chalk, drew her mother on the floor of the orphanage, and went to sleep in her lap. Mahatma Gandhi had said, "A man can never be a woman's equal in the spirit of selfless service with which nature has endowed her." When Edison was very young, he came home one day with a letter and handed that letter over to his mother and said, "My teacher gave it and said, 'Mama, only you are to read it. Will you please read it and tell me what it says?'" She opened the letter, started reading it, and started to cry, and she said, "The letter says, 'Your son is a genius. Our school is so small, we don't have appropriate teachers. Can you please educate him at home?'" Decades later, Edison became a great inventor. His mother had since died. He was going through some papers in a cabinet, and he found that letter, and he decided to open that letter. And the letter read, "Your child is mentally deficient. We cannot have him in school. He is expelled." Edison got emotional and wrote in his diary, "Thomas Edison, a mentally deficient child who was converted into the genius of the century by his mother." That is the power of a mother. That is the power of a teacher. The great Indian mystic Sant Kabir in the 15th century put a teacher or a guru at a very high pedestal. And he wrote, "Guru Govind do khade, kake lagu paye, Balihari Guru aapki, Govind yo bataye. Kabir asks, if both Guru, the teacher, and God were to appear at the door, whose feet will I worship first? He answers, it has to be the teacher's feet first, because without him, how would I have recognized God? Thank you very much. We have about 9 minutes for questions.
So maybe I missed this. Thank you, and I have read your book, so it's an honor to meet you. Just a question: so many of us as parents and as fathers, I'm a father of 3. I guess the wisdom that you have brought into your parenting skills. What was your reflection to do that? Because a lot of us are just wondering, how to be a great dad.
Yeah, great question. Actually, what really got me thinking, and as I mentioned at the start of my presentation, that I've been practicing for more than 20 years, and I've noticed in the last decade and a half that there is now a big divide that is appearing between parents and children. And the reason for that is that, especially in our part of the world, in India, parents like to raise their children the way they were raised. They only know one school of parenting. And that one school of parenting was that you never asked your parents any questions. Now, the kids these days do not accept that. And I saw that. And I used to see that over and over again. I used to see heated debates in front of me in my outpatients. And I would say, what is this? There's nothing wrong with the kids. The generation is different. They have access to technology that we didn't have. And it's quite all right for a child to say, but let me check on Google if what you're saying is right. And there is really no need to get offended. We didn't have access to that, right? We'd have to go to a library. But the kid will have an answer in 30 seconds. So the problem is with parents. And I saw that the parents needed help. And that's how I started thinking about how to translate this. And I'll try that experiment. And there was no point writing a book if I hadn't tried it on our son, because it would be really fruitless to do that. And that's really what got me thinking, got me trying. And the net result was this book. And now I devote a fair amount of my time going to schools and talking to parents, because this is something that really worries parents. It doesn't matter who you are. You're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a television star, a sports icon. You can be anybody, but when you go home, you're just dad or mom. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. When President Obama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, his daughters came up to him, and Malia, the elder one, said, Dad, you won the Nobel Peace Prize, plus it's Bo's birthday today. Bo, incidentally, is the dog that the president had presented to his daughters. And Sasha came, and plus we have a 3-day weekend coming up. So you could be the president of the United States and be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, but for your daughters, you are dad. Nothing more, nothing less. So we have a couple of minutes. So let me ask this question. Is there anyone who believes who's perfected the art of communicating with kids or children or young people? No one? No one?
You can't stop learning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Surprising with every age.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
I'm facing this with other than the gender issue of communication with my own son and daughter, which I find extremely challenging. There's the age. My daughter, when she was 7, of course, it differs when she's a teenager. But every time they grow, you need to learn.
Absolutely. And in fact, quite often I'm asked this question, what is the right time to actually start talking to your children? Can you have a conversation of this nature with a 4-year-old? And the answer is no. But what happens is that we quite often forget that young children, very young children, very keenly observe, they hear, and their mind processes. So you will see how a young girl will behave 20 years later, and the behavior will be based on how she had seen her mother react in that particular situation, and we don't even remember that. We get this great sense of pride that our 3-year-old knows how to actually manage an iPad really well, right? The child didn't go to the iPad, we took the iPad to the child. So when that child is 10 and on the dining table the child is busy on the phone, we say, oh, you have no time for me. But the child had seen his parents on the dining table doing whatever they were doing with that phone. And we believe that, when our daughter turns 12, we'll have a conversation with her, it's too late. You actually have no standing to be able to have a conversation with her about what's right and wrong if your child has actually seen you not doing what's right. We have children who are given this holiday homework from time to time, and parents are really busy, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the inclination, or they have tons of money, so they'll hire someone to do the holiday homework. And the kid will get a star and everybody will be really happy. Well, what did we introduce the child to? We introduced the child to dishonesty. The child realized that it's okay for someone else to do the work, and this is a 6-year-old child. Children will get introduced to dishonesty outside, but at least at home we need to be role models. We have to protect them. We have to actually make them realize what is honest and what is dishonest. Because when they go out, let them be strong enough to understand, to distinguish the good from the bad. And that really starts very, very early. There is really no age when to start.
I came in a little late, so my apologies. But there was an interesting debate on the radio that I caught on, I think, on my Facebook page, I'll admit it, yeah. But it was about children who continually get certificates. Certificates for participation, certificates for sometimes even for coming last. Can I ask your opinion about when is the right and wrong time to actually praise a child?
Beautiful question, and before I answer that, I'd like to comment on something that happens more often than getting a certificate for participating. It's like getting a certificate for winning. So you go, and I don't know how many of you are educationists, but you go, every school has this annual function. In many parts of the world, you have a prize distribution ceremony. So the parents are sitting there and they're clapping, and the parents of the kid who's come second is, I'm sure, told, listen, you could have done better and you could have come first. And the kid who's won a prize is told, but look at that kid, he won 3. You could have won 2 more. And I'm sure the kid who won 3 is told, listen, 3 is good, but next year, remember, 3 or more. So we put this tremendous pressure on children, and we create this pressure cooker kind of an atmosphere. Everyone likes praise. Everybody hates criticism. Each one of us hates being criticized, but we criticize often. We hate being compared to our sister, our brother, our friend, our neighbor. But we tend to compare our children to others, and they hate that as well. What everybody wants is praise for participating. I think it's great to encourage children who participate in something. It's not about winning. It's not about winning, it's about participating. And unfortunately, in the environment that we live in, it's all about winning. It's all about coming first. And honestly, it doesn't really matter in life.
We constantly have this one challenge as parents, that we want our children to have good grades.
Yep.
And we I think it must be with all the parents, we keep pushing our children to achieve. And on the other hand, if we have to tell them, like Steve Jobs has achieved so much, and he was the dropout from school. So how do we balance that with our kids?
It's a very peculiar Indian thing. Right? I mean, it's more Indian than others. I mean, when I say Indian, I mean the South Asian population is too fixated on performance and success. So what happens is that we all want what do we want really in life? We want our children to be happy. We want them to be healthy and happy. I mean, that's really the main thing that we're after, right? Now, what's the point of pushing a child into a career that he's really not interested in? I'll give you an example. I went to medical school, and my friends had got into both medicine and engineering. And in India, medicine's a very honorable profession, so a lot of them were pushed, at the subconscious level that, become a doctor. And they did medicine. And I meet them 25 years later, and they're good doctors. But you talk to them about technology, and their eyes light up. They would have made such phenomenal engineers. They would have changed the world, and they're just good doctors. They haven't changed medicine because they were forced into medicine. So I think the key is to help your child find your calling. And if they find their calling, they will excel, they will study. You don't have to tell them to study. You will not have to. You will have to stop them from working so hard if they find their calling. The other day, I had a child. She came in, and her mom said that, she's dropped out of school. So she's all of 14. So I was saying, Okay. And the girl was so excited. She says, you know, I'm going to be in the media. I want to learn filmmaking. I'm already working as an observer in a big company. I'm changing cities. And her mother, the first few times was, what is my girl doing? And then 6 months later, she said, I've never seen her so happy in life. She used to hate going to school. It was a challenge. And now she's so happy. Now, I know this is a very radical example I'm giving you of a 14-year-old dropping school, and most parents in India will have a heart attack with that concept itself. But the question is, there was this mom 6 months later telling me that I have never seen my child so happy. Right?
Thank you. Perhaps this is not a question and a statement, and maybe a very personal statement, and it may prove wrong when I'm saying it in front of you because you're in a different profession. But I've always believed that as educationalists, we understand our children better. And personally, I felt being in schools, being with children, teaching them, and guiding and counseling and doing all sorts of things that teachers do all the time. That sense of understanding, empathy, the change in mindset, change in psychology, change in how children do better and how we can help them better improves. And I would think that the teaching community really, for that matter, is really privileged because teachers do make better parents. And I think the unfortunate bit is that we're not able to influence, inspire, encourage children to become teachers, as many as we would like to think.
Yeah.
So this
no,
is just
I would tend to agree with your comment, and that's why I put in Kabir in my presentation and Edison, because it's really about the role that a teacher plays. And I mean, teachers can actually play a phenomenal role in not just raising amazing kids themselves, but also in the kids that they teach. But quite often it's really hard. And I was speaking at a huge parenting conference where a teacher asked this question, and she said, you know, you talk about finding your calling, and you know, you'd be happy to know as a doctor that my 18-year-old is now becoming a doctor. And I said, wow, wonderful, great choice. How did you decide, or how did she decide she wanted to be a doctor? And she said, you know, when she was 4 years old, we gave her lots of toys and she picked a doctor's set. So, you know, so I guess that child for 14 years was told in some form or the other that medicine's great, and I don't think she had much of a choice. Sorry, could we have the mic, please? You're not very audible. Yeah, no problem at all.
I'm principal at a school in Australia. One of our big challenges is engaging parents with the school and even with their own kids because they're so time poor in their own lives. What are some of the strategies that help to engage parents with their kids?
And they're poor in terms of?
They see that their social life and their work takes all their time, and they don't have, and that's more important in terms of
yeah. And that's really
their
such a tragedy, isn't it? Because you should only become a parent when you know your child's going to be center stage. And in the foreword of the book that is written by India's biggest superstar, he says that when you become a parent, then the needs and the wants of the child take center stage and not your needs and your wants. And it's really sad when you have someone who believes that, you know, social media and parties and what have you is more important than raising a child. And, you know, frankly, it's very hard for an educationist to even broach this topic because they're just going to bolt and they're going to say, you know, it's none of your business. We send our child for an education here. But, I mean, if you could put across to them to see a counselor, because, you know, clearly they have no insight into what they will do to their child 15 years from now, and then they will regret it, and they will deeply regret it because they will have no bond with their child, and the child will go to university and he will never look back. And it'll be so sad. So perhaps if you could encourage them to see a counselor, because they definitely need help.
Hi, my name is Aziz Roish. I'm one of the top 10 of the Global Teacher Prize in 2015. I'm from Afghanistan.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was just wondering about your approach on because the method that you're showing here, it is mostly for the elites, or to encourage and motivate the students to be one of the elites as the stars in the sky. But I am just asking about those millions of kids that they just need or want to be normal kids. They want to be successful in the normal way of life. Because only showing Steve Jobs or Nelson Mandela or all others that they have gone through a very successful way, it is to encourage the people just to be one of those. But we are now facing with millions and millions of kids around the world that they do not have those possibilities and facilities to be Steve Jobs, for example, but they want to be one person as a successful person in the world.
Great question. Actually, most of the people I quoted today had pretty disadvantaged backgrounds to start off with. They became successful because they found their calling and they were very clear about what they wanted to do in life. But of course, the world is full of examples that one can relate with closer home. I mean, you have that little boy who was Messi's fan and in Afghanistan, and his brother made that T-shirt for him, and he went and met Messi. Now, how many people in Argentina or in Spain have had the opportunity of meeting Messi? But that boy from Afghanistan did. So it's really about relating to a story. Sorry? No, it's yeah. No, I yeah.
But what about a mass population that they want to be successful?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it has to be examples that they can relate to. I mean, it doesn't really have to be examples that the world knows about. And there are examples locally. I mean, there might be someone in the community that they look up to who went through difficulties and actually became successful. So I think tailoring this to something that a child can relate to in the environment that he finds himself or herself is very important. And you make a very valid point. Great. I've been told it's time to pause. Thank you very much.